Okay, and I'm Chuck Horton, and I'm your host tonight on Double Cross Radio, coming to you live from, well, it's been warm, very warm, Southern Oregon. And I'm a little bit unprepared tonight. I apologize to the audience, but I have some things to talk about. I'm going to start off the parts that I do have planned, and I did spend some time on. I don't know if it's going to take a whole hour. I'm sure this part of it won't, but 2 years ago about this time, my parents took our entire family with them on a cruise. That's this very spendy operation. I don't know exact amount that they spent, but I'm sure it was up there. It was about 30 people that they took with us, and we took this cruise from Seattle on up to Alaska and back. And it was really a great time. Got to spend time with my brothers and their families, and all my nieces and nephews, and some of my grandchildren, and it was a fabulous thing. One of my favorite places on this cruise was when we pulled into port in Sitka, Alaska. And Sitka is a lot of these cities that you go to on these cruises are cities that have kind of grown up just to furnish, and they make their living on the cruise ship industry. The ships come into port and there's not much to do, and the people come out and they spend money and they get back on the ship and go away. And that's kind of how these ports survive. Well, Sitka actually has some other industries going there. It's a fishing place, and there's some timber interests. And it's just a real pretty place. It's kind of wet. I'm sure it gets cold in the winter, but it's on the ocean, so it doesn't get too cold, I'm sure. Not like the interior of Alaska. And when we were there, I wanted to go and see some of the things over there. They had a raptor center and a place called the Fortress of the Bear. And we decided that we would take the bus out to the Fortress of the Bear, and then there was another bus that would take you back to the Raptor Center, and that was actually close enough that you could, if you had to, you could walk back to the ship, which we ended up. There's actually another bus that came and picked us up, so we didn't have to walk. And anyway, our first stop was at the Fortress of the Bear, and this really amazed me, this place. I wish I would have had more time to spend there. And I've talked about this a little bit on the show right after we had returned from this trip. But today I happen to be wearing my Fortress of the Bear shirt, which I purchased there, and it reminded me of what a wonderful place this was. If you ever do take that Alaska cruise and you have port of call in Sitka, Alaska, I really highly recommend the Fortress of the Bear as a destination. I hope that it's still up and running. It's been kind of the mission of one single individual, and he wanted to have a sanctuary where bears who were orphaned or whatever could be raised, rehabilitated, whatever, turned back into the wild, or if they weren't able to be turned off in the wild, to be eventually given to a zoo somewhere where they could have as nice a life as is possible, and be well cared for. Well, when you first arrive there, it's, you pull off onto a gravel road and you have to kind of walk up onto this viewing platform, and you can look down into these huge, I guess they were former places where they used to store water or something, and the water's all gone, but it makes an effective pen for the bears. It's quite large. I'm sure you could almost fit a football field inside one of these pens. They have a lot of things to play with there. They have there's places where the people can go in there and treat them if they need medical attention and things like this. It's looked at as for just a volunteer facility, that they'd come up with a pretty good place to take care of these bears. And the whole kit and caboodle is, well, I didn't think I'd ever use that word in the sentence. I mean, the whole thing is funded entirely with donations. They might get a federal grant here and there. They might have some money that the city of Sitka throws their way, or helps them with maybe some road costs. But it's basically the guy goes into town, he gets the things that other people throw away, food, things that the bears might be able to use as toys. They go through them pretty fast. And they get people to donate things to him, and he uses that. They donate money. He buys food with that. And they raise these bears. I think when I was there, they had 4 bears. And 2 of them they're like teenagers, and the other 2 were a little older. And they had successfully rehomed several bears into zoos, and they had a bear that had starred in a movie, which was, that was a pretty cool thing. But they also had a lot of volunteers working there that were just thrilled to be there, and they were excited about their jobs, and they wanted to tell you what the bears did yesterday, what the bears did the day before that, what they did last week, and all the different kinds of cool things the bear did, and they would point out to this bear doesn't like this bear very well, and but this other bear that didn't like it is bigger than he is, and the bigger bear keeps taking his toys, and he doesn't like that. And you could see the social dynamics playing out, and it was really interesting to have people that were just there because they wanted to be there, and they were telling you and helping you with stuff. And I really felt moved. I made a donation there. I bought a shirt. I just felt that the money was really well spent. This was entirely done with volunteer efforts. And like I said, it wasn't necessarily the most beautiful place I've ever been to, but it was certainly one of the most interesting. And we got back on the bus when it was time to go, and we rode down the road to the Raptor Center. Now, the Raptor Center is different from the Fortress of the Bear, in that the Raptor Center is funded by, I don't know if it was State of Alaska funds or the Department of the Interior has done some funding for them, or if there's some other interests that have funded it, but it's very well funded. It's a nice state-of-the-art building with beautiful bathrooms and well lit. It's a nice parking lot. It has walking trails that you can go out, and it's along this nice river that comes through Sitka, and we saw several salmon swimming up the river. It was quite cool, actually. But there was some striking differences. This whole Raptor Center it's been funded and built on basically what I would say force and coercion. There aren't very many donations that are made. It's all taxpayer money that's taken, and all taxpayer money is taken by force and coercion. I don't know if too many people voluntarily would pay their taxes, excuse me, if they didn't have something that kind of made them do it. It becomes the kind of a risk-reward ratio type of thing. Right? So most people they're afraid not to pay their taxes. They're afraid of what's going to happen. So that's kind of what coercion is. It's how the mafia works. It's how our government collects tax money. It's kind of sick, but that's how it is. Well, that left me with, even though this was a nice facility, it left me with kind of bad taste in my mouth. It's too bad that they couldn't copy the experience that was going on down the road at the Fortress of the Bear, where there was just the whole attitude of everybody was there was so much different, and the people that worked there, I mean, they were nice, they were polite, but they really weren't interested in what they were doing. They were just putting in their 8 hours, and they were going to go home and do something, maybe go to a bar and hang out with some friends or something. Or there isn't a lot to do in Sitka. Trust me. I'm sure they were bored out of their minds just being there. They were there for a summer job, and they couldn't wait for it to be over so they could go back to whatever it was they were doing prior to their summer job. And they had that kind of a look in their eyes like, will this day ever end? And it just was such a contrast to how excited all the people were at the Fortress of the Bear, how they were just so interested in what they were doing, how they were just totally engrossed. And that was a volunteer effort as opposed to people who were there due to they were there due to coercion, not on their part, but other people had raised money through force and coercion to provide them with the job, and they didn't. It was just a job. Their ends was the cash they got for every 40 hours of work they put in for every week. And that was the only thing that really was motivating them. Is just I wanted to do the things that are required from me. I don't want to do anything more. People ask me questions, I'll answer them. I'm not going to speak at length because I don't really care about these birds that much. There were, and that's not everybody. There were some people there that were genuinely interested in the birds. I don't want to make it sound like they were all, ill-suited for this job, or why are you working here if you don't care about the birds in the Raptor Center. But anyway, to me that was a remarkable contrast. And the reason I bring this up is earlier this week I was listening to one of Tom Wood's podcasts. I love to listen to those when I drive around in the delivery car for the liquor store, and I was listening to a podcast that we had linked to on our Facebook page. This was 2 or 3 weeks ago, maybe more longer than that. It was back in June that he recorded it first. And the title of I think it's number 422, if you guys want to go and check it out, but it may be a different one. But the title is the remarkable kill rate among police. And there's an author of a blog article who has also written a book about voluntary government. But he was talking about how in the United States, among citizens, the death by homicide, or the death rate, or the amount of deaths caused by citizens, is 5 out of 100,000 people. But among police, the death rate that they cause is something like over 130 per 100,000 police, which is significantly higher than the general population, which would include criminals. And the discussion that followed, it was very interesting. And the guy had lots of statistics, but they talked about other models in other countries where the police are not armed, so if they're not armed, it's a lot harder for them to murder people or to kill people. They have to resort to using their brains and instead of just brute force. And they talked about how successful those were. They talked about a voluntary police force that was it started in California, in the San Francisco area, during the days of the gold rush. That would be in the 1850s, and still in existence today. I'm thinking, well, how come I've never heard of this voluntary police force? I've been to San Francisco many times, and they started talking about all the different kinds of voluntary efforts that people can do that don't involve government, but really benefit all of our lives. And we all indirectly, if you live in San Francisco, you benefit from this, even if you don't voluntarily support them with your money or any other efforts, because they are really interested in protecting the private property of the subscribers to their service, which are mainly the businesses that are operating in the area, and they don't harass people for non-violent crimes or victimless crimes. They're only really there to stop people that are there to steal, to deface property, or to try and do armed robberies and things like that. That's their only mission, and they're very effective. There's much lower crime rates in the areas where they patrol. I'm thinking, wow, how come nobody else ever talks about stuff like this? And what other kinds of things are there out there that could be done better through voluntary cooperation instead of forced cooperation, where people voluntarily do the things that they're going to do without anybody telling them they have to do it or else? And then, of course, I started thinking about the Fortress of the Bear and the difference between the Raptor Center and the Fortress of the Bear, between the voluntary efforts and the coerced efforts, or the efforts made possible through coercion. And I thought, wow, this is exactly the same no matter what you apply it to. The outcome from a voluntary transaction is always going to be superior to one where there's force involved. Because if you have to think about it, if you have to force people to behave in a certain way, it couldn't be that good of an idea. They are instinctively know that they're being forced to act against their own best self-interests. And maybe a lot of people don't like grizzly bears or big Alaskan brown bears, and they don't want to use their money to support them. They shouldn't be required to. Just as if they're not crazy about birds of prey, they shouldn't be required to support that effort either. It should be the people that are interested and excited and have that as their goal in life, is to help these animals. Those are the people that should be engaged in, and we should, if you feel so moved, you should benefit those animals through your efforts. Find some way to support them. Certainly the man that built and maintained the Fortress of the Bear, he's done that in his life. He didn't go out and ask government to do this for him, or try and tap into some government-funded program or grant that he could use to just kind of fill out their forms and get a check every month. No, he was trying to provide something that people would voluntarily pay money to come and see, and I would go back there again. It was one of the best experiences on that whole cruise, is my trip to the Fortress of the Bear. But the lesson there isn't that the Fortress of the Bear is a great place, although it is. The lesson there is voluntarism is morally and economically and socially superior to anything else on the planet. So why don't we use this more? Why has it become so that society is set up that we have to have government. We instead of dealing with our problems and our things on our own self and taking responsibility for our own lives and directly funding those things that'll improve the situations that we complain about, we always try to seem to make somebody else pay for it. And we use governments as kind of they're supposed to be out there protecting our rights. Well, what they're really doing is they're growing more and more powerful, because there's always something else we want them to do, and we know that it's going to be just really difficult for us to do it. So we have city councils pass laws banning smoking in public places. Well, certainly that would be a really tough thing to accomplish on your own, to go around and tell people that you can't smoke here, you're affecting me, it's making it very unpleasant for me. People would they would tell you to get lost. But if you use the force of government, oh yeah, you can mandate it, and the businesses will have to respect this, or they will shut them down. Well, that isn't a very good way to run a society. It's to threaten people with losing their livelihood if they don't go with this bill. And a lot of times the people that are being offended are just a noisy minority. They're not even represent a majority opinion. But even if they did represent a majority of an opinion, what about the rights of the minority? What about the rights of the people who want to smoke? They don't want to go outside in sub-zero weather to smoke a cigarette. Couldn't there be, wouldn't a better situation be for there to be some businesses that don't allow smoking in their business? It's their right. And other businesses that would encourage it, and they would have sign outside that said this is a smoking establishment, this is a non-smoking establishment, and let the market decide what is the best way to do this. You vote with your dollars. If you don't like a smoky bar, then you go to the non-smoking place. If you want to smoke, then you go to the smoking place. Isn't that a more peaceful way to settle something like that? Isn't a non-governmental solution always going to be more peaceful? Isn't it always going to be more beneficial to everybody involved? Because to enforce these statutes, the government has to have more taxes. They have to take more out of everybody's pockets. They have to grow more powerful. And then if there's really no need for them to have a compliance officer and all this sort of stuff, they go out and they start looking for reasons to justify their existence. They don't want to have to reduce staff because, well, gosh, I guess nobody really did want any smoking in their establishment. People don't mind going outside. We don't really have to enforce this. We don't have to go around checking it out. But we still have to have some kind of a bureaucratic office that at least writes regulations that we can give to people who, when they renew their business licenses and such, or we can have health officials that regularly monitor the restaurants and bars that would be affected by this regulation. And it just becomes almost pathetic how hard they work to keep their jobs, to keep their ability to tax people, to steal money from other people. It's theft. Taxation, all taxation is theft. And once government is granted that authority to steal your assets, your money that you earned without any criminal penalty, well, they're going to do it. And so anyway, those are just some of the thoughts I had about the Fortress of the Bear and how the lessons of that I learned on that trip could be applied to everything we do in society, in our government. And I don't know, right now we're really busy at the store, so I don't have as much time as I would like to always to prepare for these shows, but it's one of the Tom Woods radio broadcasts, his podcasts, and it's the one that talks about the kill rate among police. It was a very interesting discussion, and the person he was interviewing, I believe it was Ed Stringham was the man's name. He's written a book about voluntary government, and I think that I'm going to read that book. And hopefully if I find it exciting, then maybe he would be a guest on our show sometime. I think he's a really fascinating person, at least from his interview he's an economist. He really believes in free markets. He really believes in voluntary action. I believe he's a libertarian. He believes in the non-aggression principle. All the things that I think make society a better place. And I think he'd be an excellent guest. So if any of you happen to get on this blog or mention it, just say you heard about it on Double Cross Radio. I would appreciate that plug. And that would also help. Maybe someday we could have Tom Woods as a guest also. He's a very busy person. And I think he was finally interviewed by Jeff Berwick. And Jeff said he had to ask him to be on the show for over 2 years. He was hounding him. And finally, Tom Woods needed he was coming out with some book and he wanted to help promote it. And he said, well, this will work good for both of us. You can interview me and get your thing out of the way, and I can promote my book that I'm coming out with. And so both of them were able to get their purposes served by that, and he agreed to be interviewed on a show. I don't know if Double Cross Radio is ever going to rise to that level where we have a big enough audience that it would help Tom Woods sell a bunch of copies of his book. But I do know that the last time we had Jeff Berwick on, Jeff he recorded the show and put it up on his YouTube channel. And the last time I checked, it had over 15,000 views, which is a lot for us. That's probably the most listened to show we've ever had. Now, some of the comments in there said the host was really an amateur. I mean, that is true. That is very true. I am really an amateur. I talk all day, and by the time I get here, the railroad show, my voice is kind of scratchy, and like right now I could use a drink of water, and I didn't bring one with me when I sat down, so I'm going to have to tough it out for the next 40 minutes or 35 minutes. But it's an amazing thing when you get in someone's wheelhouse, or someone who's really well known like Tom Woods or Jeff Berwick or future guests, which I hope we're going to be able to get him on. Jeffrey Tucker wrote an amazing piece 2 weeks ago about Donald Trump and how he's kind of a fascist. He didn't use that exact word. He said a lot of things he says sound like fascism, which is almost the same thing, but he actually was pulling his punches a little bit. But everybody got the message, and he wrote another piece this week, and he actually posted it on July 19th, which I think technically was Sunday. And excuse me for having to clear my throat all the time. It's really scratchy right now. But I thought I would just spend a minute and read this, because I thought it was a really good companion piece to the piece that he had written. I think it was 2 weeks prior, but it might have been 1 week prior. Anyway, by the time, I think it was 1 week prior, by the time I talked about it on our show, was that he was already about 4 or 5 days into it. And he said that, I'm just going to read from his article. This is Jeffrey Tucker speaking. By the way, this is at liberty.me, and it's also on his page. It's Beautiful Anarchy. And you should visit that site. You can subscribe to be a supporter of liberty.me for $5 a month, which is a great bargain. There's a lot of really interesting people there. It's kind of like preaching to the choir. You can't get up there and convert people, but they have some very stimulating conversations, and they do have disagreements from time to time about different aspects of libertarian thought. And they're not just a mono choir marching to the same drum beat. They have different themes and things that they're interested in. It's a pretty great group of people. A lot of them are very young. They don't have a tremendous amount of experience, but they really are intellectually superior to me. I can tell just by reading their arguments. They are very good thinkers, and the reading that they've done has well prepared them for their future life. I mean, they really understand things at a deeper level than I ever did at their age. So I don't discount them just because they're young. And they also have some amazing older people that are there that have had very successful lives. Some of the people that come into mind are Wendy McElroy, who's one of my favorite authors. There's Rick Rule, I think Rick Rule. He's a financial advisor. He's been on a lot of the talking head investment shows that are on cable TV. Of course, Jeffrey Tucker from time to time participates in conversations debate. They have classrooms for people that are discussing different kinds of topics. Really a great site. You should check it out. But anyway, this was posted in liberty.me, and so I'm taking some liberty to reread it tonight. So I'm quoting now from the article. The picture on the top of this is a picture of Benito Mussolini in Italy giving a rabble-rousing speech to, looks like thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. And the piece goes, last week I wrote an article that I'm pretty sure received the highest circulation I've ever had on a single piece of writing. It was an interesting experience. The first version appeared on liberty.me. And this is the one I read last week. I think part of that show was we had technical difficulties, and I went off the air and didn't realize it. I just kept talking. So I'm trying to make sure I stay connected this week. Let's continuing on here. Probably 4 days later, I revised it and restyled it, and it appeared on fee.org. That's FEE.org. Then Newsweek picked it up, then Zero Hedge, and it went viral from there. My social was slammed. I can't keep up with the interview requests. And one of those interview requests came from me. I thought this was awesome that someone in media finally had the guts to call a spade a spade. That's a figure of speech. There is nothing racial about that. It means the card, a spade, deck of cards. But he had correctly identified a lot of the themes that Donald Trump was promoting to be rather, very similar to things that you'd find in a fascist economic system. And I think that because he's probably the first one to have the guts to say that on a national level like that, he probably was pretty much in demand because people wanted to either try and show him as a radical person that shouldn't be listened to, or they were very interested in what he had to say because they see that, as Jordan Page says, the world is teetering towards the end, it's in our theme song every week. So continuing on, it's a bizarre thing because I write every day. Why this one? Why now? I have no idea, no theory. I try to put valuable stuff in everything I write, so I don't regard this article's popularity as a commentary on its quality. It's just somehow hit the right way at the right time. You can't game this system. It amuses me when people accuse me of having written something to go viral, as if it was that easy. I would do it more often if that was so. But I did learn something from this experience. I learned that we desperately need a theory of right-wing statism. We know what socialism is. We think of it as left-wing, but the culturally right-wing version has no real name. We talk about specific variants of right-wing theory, such as theocrats, jingoists, racialists, and so on. But it's all rather haphazard. These describe odd biases and impulses, but not a political theory, or an economic one either. So when someone like Donald Trump comes along, we have no real term to describe his views. We listen to him scream about making the nation into a business, about the evil of foreigners, the danger of bad trade deals, about the need for a new order of things that bypasses the sluggish and cowardice of the status quo. We listen, but it all sounds like the random yangerings of a crank. And I bet some people, when Mussolini and Hitler were up making their random yammerings of a crank, there were some people that felt that way too, but as they started to try and get an audience or to have people listen to them, they were kind of put down. They were, in some cases, they were silenced. They were put in jails. They were whatever. So when I heard his speech, that'd be Donald Trump's, it gradually dawned on me that I had heard all these views before. They are rather new in modern history, or rather they had never cohered in this way before the interwar period, but they did indeed come to cohere, pushed mostly as an alternative to socialism. This alternative to socialism was not freedom as such. It was another version of the planned society, but without the completely idiotic theories pushed by socialist lunatics for the last 500 years. In a brief period in the 1930s, it developed the right name. It came out of syndicalist theory and eventually led to Nazism, and then was blown away in wartime. But between 1930, my printer kind of chopped off this page, and 1938, it had a name, and it was briefly respectable and gained a gigantic following. In fact, it was far more popular all over the developed world than socialism ever was. Its name was fascism. What were its tenets? Like socialism, it sought a planned society ruled by smart people with power and resources. But unlike socialism, it had no interest in strange and far-flung theories about overthrowing human nature, creating a new man, abolishing religion, or getting rid of the family or private property. Indeed, it praised all these institutions. It only clarified that these institutions needed to serve the national interest in the collective heart of the people. What could possibly go wrong with that? It draws on revolutionary idealism to some extent. It says that the current system is deeply corrupt. That's true. It serves specific interests only, which is also true. It is riddled with graft, bribes, and payoffs. It calls for a new plan that sweeps away the existing order and replaces it with a plan that serves a higher ideal. That ideal can be anything: race, history, people, industry, whatever. It doesn't matter. What matters is the power that is necessary to make the system smarter, more productive, more mighty, and glorious. Fascism, then, would not propose the abolition of private property or even the nationalization of industry. It would not propose to suppress religion or family. It proposes regulatory controls on all these sectors of life in order to channel them into a single national interest. And like I said, what could possibly go wrong with that? This requires a massive totalitarian state, one that effectively obliterates any room for individual decision-making, institutional autonomy, freedom of action, entrepreneurship, and so on. It is conventionally believed that fascism does not have a fully worked out plan for managing national life. That's true enough. But actually, its plans are more worked out in practice than socialism ever was. The socialists, I just had a noise. I guess I'm still connected. The socialists were famed for their blistering criticism of capitalism, but rather short when it came to actually showing how their harebrained system of collective ownership of scarce goods would work. In contrast, the fascists were much more overt about their plans for economic life. Business would be cartelized. Labor would be syndicated. Trade would be mercantilized. Production and consumption subjected to massive regulatory oversight in the name of national interest. Yes, it is, and they also do this in the name of to have a more planned society. We don't want to overproduce things that we don't need. We want to do things that are best for the national interest. We want our production to be centrally planned, so we make sure that everybody's working towards the same ends, and we don't duplicate, effort and stuff like that. This is all my additions to it. So back to the article. No, I do not believe that Trump has done a private study of the works of the Italian syndicalists in order to arrive at his views. I also believe that. Fascism took hold in history not because it is a systemized theory of politics. It took hold because it cobbles together a series of cultural biases with the belief that the state is the best possible tool for organizing economic and social life. Anyone who can combine those two can find themselves stumbling, however haphazardly, into embracing fascist theory. Yes, and I'm going to take an aside here again. In America, I think probably around the whole world, fascist has come to mean someone who is anti-Semitic or someone who hates Jews, or they're really losing the things behind fascism that made it the evil that it was. It's that everything is for the greater good. It's a lot like socialism in that respect, but there's nothing voluntary about it. If anybody who is not for what has been centrally planned and ordered becomes then an enemy of the state. And from there, I guess you go to re-education camps, or they put you in labor camps, forced labor camps, sometimes called death camps. Well, back to the article. But just as with socialism, fascism is also a method for propagandizing people into considering a new way of ordering society. The fascist must get elected. He must convince people to acquiesce to his dictatorial aspirations. And here's where the failures of the current system serve him well. The entire establishment is deeply corrupt, incredibly stupid, not serving the nation, failing to boost the national spirit, and so on. The orator seeks to tap into raw emotion in hopes of inspiring a suspension of incredulity. So, this paragraph is entirely spot on. It's exactly what happens. Donald Trump, it's so easy for him to examine the current situation and to find failure. And it isn't hard at all. Anybody who has half a brain, and even if half a brain is tied behind his back, they can see the present system isn't working very well. And if they've lived long enough here in this country, they know that things were much, much better 20, 30 years ago. Even without all these new technological toys we have, we had a much better economy. There wasn't any fear like there is now of all the bad things that are likely to happen to us. Just because they haven't doesn't mean they won't. And it isn't hard to point out our growing national debt, the fake unemployment statistics, the unclaimed liabilities, future liabilities that exceed $200 trillion. I mean, our country is in deep, deep shit. And Greece's going down the tubes right now, and Greece is in much better shape financially than we are. The only thing that's keeping us afloat is the dollar is the world's trade currency. And people have this I don't know where they get it, but they have this faith that the dollar will remain strong, and so they're getting rid of their currencies in these different countries, and they're all buying dollars because they think that's their best bet. So anyway, all these things are easy to point out. It doesn't take. I mean, a guy with an internet radio show that works out of his office in his house and does this as a hobby. If he can find all this information out, I'm sure that somebody has a research staff and wants to can find that information out as well. It is not hard to find the failings of the present system. That is easy, and that's what people like Donald Trump do. And so when you hear him talking about this wave of immigration becoming a problem, and there's people coming in this country and they're murdering American citizens, well, there are American citizens in this country that are murdering American citizens. I'm sure that a certain percentage of the people that are flooding across the border are bad people. The questions we need to be asking is why are they coming here? And I think the right answer is they're coming here for all the free stuff. So we have a socialist society right now. This isn't the land of the free. This is socialism. And it's rapidly moving towards fascism because socialism, the problem is you eventually run out of other people's money. Well, in fascism, the same thing happens, but some people get to preserve their wealth. And they're the insiders. They're the ones that get to be all the central planners, that run the cartels, that are the labor union bosses, the people that run the system. They pretty much enslave everybody else to do their bidding. So I'm getting back to Jeffrey Tucker saying I want to know that last paragraph about talking about fascism was so spot on. It was just incredible. Fascism is also deeply personal, more so than socialism. It is all about the great leader's capacity to wrest control of an entire economy and nation and steer it in the right direction. Thus, does business or military success become central to the campaign? You have to have a proven record of doing implausibly amazing things no mere mortal could accomplish without some special gift. Two names come to mind within the Republican ranks, John McCain and Donald Trump. So it's not surprising that they are fighting like scorpions in a jar. It's actually delightful to watch. Trump said that McCain is no war hero, and the Republican establishment went nuts with denunciations. According to all reports on the ground in Iowa, most of the actual Republicans at the grassroots level don't really care that Trump has insulted McCain. Most all GOP activists are sick and tired of this McCain guy in any way. Where Trump really messed up was in using the words hell and damn in his speech. This upset many religious people in Iowa. One person was quoted in the New York Times worried that perhaps Trump is not really born again. If that rumor continues to spread, he will have no future. It would become one of the greatest ironies of American politics if, in the end, it is, I think I'm saying this right, pietism that stops the advance of fascism in our time. So it's an amazing op-ed. It's on liberty.me, and all of you should check it out and read it for yourself without my rambling interruptions. Enjoying liberty.me. I really enjoy my membership there. I think it's I mean, if you're going to stand for freedom, you should support freedom. But it's a voluntary effort. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. If you think that $5 a month is a little bit too much for your budget and you don't think you're going to get any benefit out of it, so why should you spend your money? It's going to benefit everybody else. Well, you shouldn't. But if you think that promoting freedom is going to have benefits in your lifetime that you're really hard to measure, and you think that for $60 a year you could help promote these ideas of liberty and freedom and, less and less government to maybe we get to actually govern ourselves like we're supposed to, and maybe even restrict the size of the governing bodies to the, one municipality is one governing body and another, you go down the road to the next municipal body and that will be the next city. And maybe there'll be some organizations that try and have some of sameness from one place to the next. But really, if you don't have very many laws and regulations, you don't really need to worry about that. I mean, I think everybody realizes that killing somebody else is bad, and taking their stuff is bad, and even just threatening to hurt somebody in order to get them to do what you want is bad. And so if you just kind of had some basic guidelines, I think everybody would get along just fine. I'm sure there's some people that will not respond well to this. And it's not like the current system. We have all law-abiding citizens. I mean, as Thomas Sowell once said, there are lots of laws against crime. They don't seem to be working. So that's my answer to that. Is that I'm not telling you you're going to have a perfect utopia. I'm telling you that it isn't going to be any worse than it is now. And it has the potential to be much, much better. So my theme tonight has been, oh gosh, we only have 12 minutes left. That lasted quite a bit longer than I thought. So my theme tonight has been one of decentralization, one of not becoming fascist, not one of going away from that model, going away from socialism. Socialism doesn't work. It has never worked. Every country that's tried it, including most recently Venezuela, has gone broke rather quickly. And fascism, they call it a vampire economy for a reason. And I tell you, it's when you have insurance companies writing Obamacare for their benefit, that's fascism. That's the industry, the cartels becoming the central planners. And they influence what the government does. The government then just become the faceless bureaucrats that enforce the rules that were written by the people that are in industries that are supposed to be regulated by that bureaucracy. It's kind of, it's almost like a, I don't think Dante could have imagined this level of I don't know what the right word is. He's talking about all the bad things in hell. I don't think he could imagine anything as bad as our current system of government in the United States. So that's been the show tonight. I had one other little thing I wanted you guys all to check out. Earlier this week, Alex Jones had Wayne Madsen on his show, and Wayne had some really interesting information about a former White House chef who was hired during the Clinton administration. And he was there through the Clinton administration and also served as the chef for the majority of the Bush administration. He did not get along well with the Bush family and eventually left his job a couple years before the end of the second term. He was there, though, and witnessed the events of 9/11, and he eventually wrote a book about being in the White House for both of these families. And I think he had some really damaging information about Hillary to share with the world. And as a lot of people who are connected to the Clintons and the Bushes, for that matter, because they're kind of the same people. There's no secret that H.W. Bush calls Bill Clinton. He's one of his own sons, and W. Bush treats him like he's his brother. So they very well could be the same family. It could be a little. Bill Clinton's mother was a prostitute, so who knows who the father was? It could have been a Bush. Anyway, this chef, he knew a lot of the inside stuff that happened in the Clinton administration, and he certainly overheard some things that happened on 9/11 that kind of tend to give a lot of credibility to what a lot of the conspiracy theorists have to say about the government being aware of this is going to happen and actually either running it or managing it so that it could work in their favor. And I mean, it has, the 9/11 events did produce the Patriot Act, which was somehow hatched out of thin air. It's a massive document, and it was all ready to go prior to that incident. I mean, they had already written it prior. They just needed something to happen in order to put it into play. So, and this is the rolling out of the police state to have more power to be intrusive in the lives of the ordinary citizens. And it's all stuff that happened with that. Well, this chef, he was living in New Mexico. He was retired, and he'd written a book. By the way, his last name was, well, you have to watch the video to get his last name. Scheid, I believe, is his last name. And he went out for a hike, and he was reported missing by his wife, and they found him a few days later in a ravine in some water, and the water kind of made an autopsy inconclusive because it destroys a lot of the evidence. The decay of the body is sped up, and through osmosis, a lot of the things that are in the cells get contaminated with the water that the body was lying in. So, anyway, he's another one of those people that is an associate of the Clintons that turned up dead through accidental death. And it's possible that it was an accident, but I tell you, it's got to be over 60 or 70 people by now. And I don't know anybody that I have ever known that knows 60 or 70 people that have accidentally died during their life, or I guess this would be during the last 35 years. And I really believe that there's somebody who did this guy in, and whether it had anything to do with the Clintons or the Bushes, I don't know. But the circumstances about how the body was found and everything should raise a lot of red flags, and there should be a lot of questions that you should try and answer before you just assume it was an accidental death. And I don't think that those questions have been raised. There's also, Wayne Manson contends that the body was found, there was an envelope on his person that had a letter in it that said, if I am found dead accidentally, make sure that Larry Nichols finds out about this. Now, Larry Nichols was the guy that is the whistleblower that almost brought the Clintons down. I mean, almost all the people who didn't die that were associated with the Clintons went to prison because of Larry Nichols' evidence that he managed to copy and take out of the governor's mansion. And actually, it wasn't a governor's mansion. It was out of the firms that were controlling the actions of the government. And Larry Nichols I think he's very sick now. He's got cancer. I don't know how much longer he's going to live, but I tell you, that guy's got a lot of courage to stand up and do what he did, and the fact that he's still living means that he's someone they couldn't afford to have an accidental death, because that kind of would prove that a lot of the stuff that he was saying was correct, which it was. I mean, these were actual documents, and a lot of the things that I've brought up about Hillary in the past are things that originated with research that Larry Nichols did. And I remember listening to him in the 80s, excuse me, in the 90s on the Michael Reagan show, and he was also a frequent guest on Alex's show, but I wasn't listening to Alex Jones back then. And Larry Nichols always, to me, seemed to be very credible and had a lot of knowledge, and he will tell you that the Bushes are about the most corrupt, evil people he's ever known in his life. And neither one of them is really smart enough to have pulled all this stuff off by themselves. They're just the front men for a really evil organization that's behind them. And it's called he called them the Dixie Mafia. It's an organized crime organization, and they are very, very strong, and they have a lot of influence in the South. I'll just leave it at that. I want all of you to know that if I turn up accidentally dead, I'm not suicidal. I'm a very positive, happy person. Occasionally, I overwork a little bit. So if I have if I work myself to death, that's probably a psychological disorder that I will admit to. But I'm a very positive person. I'm not ever depressed. And I'm a very happy person. I have a loving wife, and I have a nice life, and I enjoy it very much. So it's drawing at the end of the show. I just urge you all again to check out that YouTube video. It's on the Alex Jones channel, and it's featuring Wayne Madsen. And Wayne Madsen is he was a whistleblower, a government whistleblower. His life threatened. He's a truth crusader, and he's doing this just because he thinks that he loves his country. He thinks the danger this country is facing is just immense, and he's trying to wake up as many people as possible. He's just having his expenses paid. He's not making any additional money from all the work he's doing. So that about wraps it up for this week, and I want to thank Jules at UCY for providing this platform for our show, and thank all the people who listen every week and tune in and write about stuff in chat and tell their friends and spread the news and watch the YouTubes or sign into them and pretend like they watch them. And the people that listen to the shows on the podcasts that are linked in the Double Cross UCY archives, I really appreciate every single one of you, and anybody that shares this and spreads it on to other people. I think you guys are awesome. And so we're signing off for this week. The music's going to start any second. And good night, and have a nice week. We'll see you next Thursday. And I want to also announce in the coming weeks we are going to have Jeffrey Tucker. He's agreed to come on the show. We have to get our schedules synced up. And we're also going to have Mary Ruart on, who is a health expert and a researcher, and she's amazing. And both of those events are going to be shows that you don't want to miss. So stay tuned and keep watching on our Facebook page for this. The dates for these people are going to be on the show. It's going to be really exciting to have them on in August. So until then, stay free, everybody. Good night.
Time.